Hi, Charles.
Sarah, so good to see you. How you been?
Good, good. It's been a busy year, but I'm surviving and thriving. So, yeah, how have you been? How is 2025 treating you so far?
It's been a tough year. It's only February too. We just have a lot of moving pieces. So, we gotta get a lot of Cardano stuff done. We're really working hard on midnight. I forgot how hard it is to actually launch a cryptocurrency and going through that entire process. Last time I did it was 2017, so there's an enormous checklist of things you have to get through, and it's just a slog and a lot of politics right now. I'm going around the entire state of Wyoming, going to every county to talk to people, one of 23. I did the same in Japan. I went from Hokkaido all the way down, and so I now have to do that for my home state. So that'll be fun. A lot of ranching stuff. There's too many bison on the ranch. Dealing with that. Got a lot of cool stuff in the synthetic biology side. My clinic is under heavy construction. We're building 102,000 square feet of stuff in Gillette. So yeah, all around it's busy. Everywhere you look, you throw a stone, you hit some work that needs to get done.
Fantastic. It's going to be an exciting year. I'm really looking forward to 2025. Yeah. So, we've received several questions, actually many questions from the Japanese community to you, and just wanted to give you context. So many questions are related to timely topics like budget and roadmap, etc. And but also there are some questions about you personally, and I think this comes from the fact that many of Japanese community members consider you as one of the brightest minds of our generation, and we're just really curious to know how you were brought up and want to learn from the lessons that you learned throughout the course of your career. And so, in the interest of time, like I'm gonna focus first on Cardano related timely questions like budget roadmap, but also if we have time, we can go through some of the personal questions. So I'm gonna get right into it. So the budget, assuming a net change limit of 350 million ADA, what portion should be allocated to intersect and what portion should be reserved for non-intersect budgets?
Yeah, so I think there's a misnomer that's being pushed around by certain people when they say, "Oh, it's allocated to Intersect." They're denoting as if Intersect is this entity that acts like the Cardano Foundation, where it gets to pick and choose what it funds and it has a God mode like control over everything. Intersect was never set up for that. The actual operating budget of Intersect is quite small. It's in the mid seven figures. So what Intersect's job is it's a members-based organization and it's a convening function for things like your roadmap or your budget. But at the end of the day, it's just a convening function. And it may take a role of audit and oversight, but it doesn't own the money. It doesn't have discretion over where that money goes. And it's not an operating entity to control the strategy of Cardano. So the overall proportion of that money going to Intersect should be very low, Intersect itself. But then there's a question of, well, how does that money get managed? If we withdraw, let's say, $100 million or $200 million of money, while it's sitting there, where does it sit? Does it sit in a trust? Does it sit in a smart contract or some hybrid of these two? And who is in a position to stop payment? So if a contractor is not doing their job, which person is the person who pulls the lever to stop the funds flowing to that person? So I think some combination of Intersect and others alongside smart contracts can be used to facilitate that. And if we have any money left over at the end of the year, it should go back to the Treasury. It doesn't just get turned over to Intersect for them to do what they will with it. But overall, the budget has to follow a strategy. And so your strategy is the product roadmap. So what do we want to achieve? Where do we want to go? And then also your ecosystem. So who do we want to take along with us? So there are certain core functionalities that we think that make Cardano competitive, like Ouroboros Laos or Bitcoin DeFi, or getting Hydra where it needs to go. And there's dozens of these types of things. That's your product roadmap. Then your budget is the enabling function to actually make that happen. And then there you have to actually decide some difficult trade-offs. For example, this is the first year where there's legitimate clients being built. The Rust client from Pragma, with Amaru. You got Blink Labs with their Go client. You have Harmonic with TypeScript. How much funding should we provide for those? And should they be considered first-class citizens with the Haskell node? If you say yes to that, well, then the budget goes up considerably because they actually have to catch up and be built up. How fast do you want Ouroboros Laos? Do you want to go full in for that and develop it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Or do you want it just to be built like any other feature in Cardano, and it may be a multi-year roadmap for this type of a thing? So the budget will reflect these types of things. And so how much proportionally of that net change goes into the budget overall is going to be completely connected to the desire for new features, the desire for resilience, the redundancies that we put in for the budget, alongside how many governing bodies and audit and oversight you want. The more audit and oversight you want, the more expensive that is. You may actually end up spending more money on audit and oversight than you do on delivery if you're not careful. So you have to be very cognizant of these things. And the next 2-3 months is when we're going to debate all that as an ecosystem and ultimately make some decisions about it. Now, we published a roadmap where we felt that this is where we should go, and we think the budgets of the next 2-3 months will be a reflection of that. There are alternatives that are now coming in, and they need to be debated by the DREPs, and ultimately a reconciliation has to happen. So all the budgets that have been proposed, the DREPs have to come together, and then those DREPs will make a decision of what the consensus budget is, and the budget's the budget then. And then we all have to learn how to live within our means.
Fantastic. I think that dispels some of the confusion and misunderstandings. And personally, we would love to go full in on Laos in 2025. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, if it were up to you, how would you allocate 350 million ADA across different categories to ensure Cardano's success?
Well, it's a blend of things. So first off, you can't lose the ecosystem we have. So you have to identify the top 50 to top 100 projects on Cardano and say, are you financially doing okay, or do you need a subsidy? If not whole, partial, then whole. Because we don't want to lose any of those people. They're doing great work, whether it be Tap Tools or EUTXO or C Explorer or whatever. There's a lot of great things that are floating around that you don't want them to be underfunded. You need to give them the resources they need to stick around. Then second, you have to ask, what will grow Cardano the most over the next 12 to 24 months? So I think things like Bitcoin DeFi, for example, are really critical because they help differentiate us from all these Ethereum killers, and it allows us to grow into a new ecosystem that has $2 trillion of value, and also the ecosystem that'll have the highest degree of liquidity of the entire cryptocurrency space. Similar to the partner chain strategy, where that allows us to create airdrops to other ecosystems and bring users and liquidity into Cardano. So partner chains and Bitcoin DeFi, I think, are a huge plank because they make us no longer an island. They make us a peninsula. We get lots of people to come in to the space. There are some core capabilities that need to be refined or enhanced or cleaned up. So we need to improve the development experience. We need to continue building on the gains with Aiken and continue differentiating us with Plinth and these other ecosystems of languages. So continue building up TypeScript and high assurance stuff. But then also we need to continue building up the capabilities like Hydra and get them to a point where it can be integrated into applications. So Midgard and Gummyworm in particular are two technologies that once they leave the innovation group, they really have to be doubled down. We have to get them into production and get them into our ecosystem. And that's where I think you can get some event-oriented architectures as well as data availability and other things that we're not where we need to be there. We also need to backfill some things. Like, for example, we need to get our oracles sorted out. And we can get Chainlink in. I don't think that's a financial problem. It's just the work. And we've re-engaged those conversations that kind of stalled up in 2022. The stablecoin issue also has to be resolved. I don't think Circle is the panacea that people make it out to be. I feel our homegrown ones, USDM and USDA, have a lot of great potential, and they're much more compatible with the ethos of the Cardano ecosystem. But we as an ecosystem have to take care of them then. We have to build them up and get them the liquidity that they need, get the listings done. We have to also improve the Cardano native asset support on exchanges. Kraken has warmly embraced us with SNEC, but there are many, many more things that we need to do to get that where it needs to go and get more people listed. Then I think we need differentiating capabilities. And in particular, we need to continue building up our governance stack and continue building up our scalability. So Laos, I agree, is a critical priority, and it has to get done. And in terms of governance, I think we need to get all the rough edges out of this and continue improving that infrastructure and getting more participation and making sure it's meaningful and get new governance features in and not lose Catalyst. We have to figure out what the role of Catalyst is with the budget and get those things sorted out. That's a lot of work for a year. There's a ton of different pieces there, but they all have to be put into play. And there's a lot of partnerships that can be made to help us with the marketing and the optics. We need to have a presence at all of the major events, Token 2049 and Consensus and Blockchain Paris. But more importantly, it's not just we have a presence, IO or the foundation. The builders of Cardano, the people building on Cardano, the top 50 to 100 projects, they're not getting the exposure that they need. So a subsidy needs to be put to get them to go, because one of the biggest complaints I hear is people say, I've never seen anybody building on Cardano. I don't know anybody building on Cardano. So the developers on Cardano, they need to get out in front and center at these places, whether it be Denver or Token 2049, just so they can build the relationships, the contacts. We need to backfill some of our startup infrastructure as well. We need to have good incubation acceleration program, go partner with like Techstars or 500 startups, get them in, and take people building on Cardano and get them into that incubation acceleration cycle so that they're VC ready. A lot of people say, well, VCs don't like Cardano. I think the issue is that a lot of the things that have tried to get venture capital, they weren't quite ready for it. And as a result, they didn't get where they needed to go. If we go and have a proper partner for that, it'll help resolve these types of issues. And with technology like partner chains, it means that a lot of VCs will feel a lot more comfortable investing because they say, okay, well, this thing can also work for Ethereum and Solana and these other such things. So we don't feel it's like a Cardano only bet for these types of things. And then they're willing to put money in. And I think Midnight will open a lot of doors for that. We also need to not forget the markets that we grew up in, like Africa and Latin America and other places. And we need to make sure that we actually continue to invest in those markets and grow them. And there's a lot that we could discuss in that respect. But overall, I think that's kind of the corpus of a strategy. But it's not just what I think. We need to bring the ecosystem together and have them kind of add to that corpus. And we have to pick and choose what we want to do. I know how to build Laos. I know how to build a lot of the core technology. We know how to build up Hydra. We have the great partners for it. We know how to make the programming languages better. We're on a really good cadence with Aiken and a really good cadence with Plinth, and people have seen noticeable, significant improvements for that. And we have a pretty good understanding of what's required technology-wise to make Cardano quite competitive. It's the ecosystem stuff where the community needs to show up, and they really need to add their 2 cents about where are they seeing things. Like Midgard, for example, could turn into an optimism competitor and be quite competitive because it has unique advantages. Does that make sense for us as an ecosystem, and what customers exist for that? These are example of ecosystem questions, not technology questions. And that's where the roadmap gets very interesting.
Fantastic. Thank you. And when you mention subsidies for top projects on Cardano, are you talking about Catalyst, or are you envisioning something else?
So let's say that you're running a website or running a dApp or some service that most of the people in Cardano are using. Maybe it's a library or whatever, and you have 1 or 2 full-time employees and you have some form of operating cost for that. And there's nobody subsidizing this right now. And what you've been traditionally doing is going to Catalyst again and again and again. And year after year, they're funding you. And it's incredibly time-consuming and painful. It's a lot of work to fill out a Catalyst application, to go through all the rounds and all this stuff. And you're like, dude, I'm just asking for a continuation of the thing that I've already been building for the last 3 years. Why do I have to go through this whole process? Also, you're taking money out of the Catalyst pipeline for new things to Growth Hack. So it makes sense to bundle all those types of things together and say, let's just subsidize them on a yearly basis and let them continue doing what they do. They've already proven that they have that capability. They've already proven that they have a use case, a customer. They're providing value to the Cardano ecosystem. Like a lot of these Cardano wallets don't make any money or very little money, and yet they're vital for us to be able to use ADA on our phone or other things. So what about Vesper and Giro Wallet and these other guys? It makes a lot of sense to provide a partial or complete subsidy depending upon the scale. And when you add these together, they're not a lot. In many cases, it's $250,000 or $500,000, and you can finance 50 of them and not break the budget if you want to. And it turns out that that's vital infrastructure. Blink Labs is another example. There's only 4 people at Blink Labs, and they're not even all full-time. And yet they're building a Go Cardano client. There's a lot of cool stuff that they could do. So to me, it makes a lot of strategic sense to try to bundle a lot of these together and just provide annual subsidies for them. It gets them out of Catalyst and it focuses Catalyst more on innovation and new ideas. And these older ideas that have been successful and they've graduated, we then take care of them as core infrastructure for the ecosystem.
I agree. So, recently I've seen a lot of debates happening regarding DREP compensation. In your view, should DREPs receive compensation?
Well, it depends on what we want as an ecosystem. And this is a fundamental question. So if you want DREPs to be mostly sourced from products and projects in institutions, you don't need to compensate them because the DREP is just naturally lobbying for their business. So if I have a wallet or if I have a DApp like MinSwap or SundaySwap, go become a DREP and you're going to represent the needs of that. And if you're fine with that, that's what you'll get for your DREPs. And a lot of DREPs actually come from that pool. If you want independent DREPs, a professional political class, meaning they're not beholden to anyone, they don't have a particular project, it's a pretty unrealistic thing to say that this person is going to reliably show up, reliably vote on everything, reliably do all these things without any compensation at all. So what you pay is what you get. If you don't compensate, they have to make their money somewhere else. So either they're part-time or they work for a project. If you do compensate, then their full-time job can be Cardano. So I think it's perhaps possible to actually have both coexist. And one of the things that could be done as a compromise is basically providing a DREP subsidy through some organization like Intersect or the foundation or what have you. And then some set of DREPs can apply for that and get grants from that organization to cover their entire salary, and they could be a professional political class. That may be a way to get around this, but it's a difficult topic. The other issue is how much do you pay DREPs? Because the value of labor is different everywhere, and also the commitment's different. So you may say this DREP's doing a great job and working 24/7. Someone else may say, well, that DREP's only working part-time and they should only be paid $1,000 a month. Who's right? And if you say, well, on-chain metrics like how many things they voted on, okay, what if they voted no on everything or voted yes on everything? Technically, they have 100% attendance, but was there any wisdom to say, oh, then they have to write rationales? What if every rationale is written from ChatGPT? And so, oh, they wrote 20 pages, but it's all AI generated. And you see, so there's a lot of ways you can game the system if you want to do it on chain. So it makes a lot more sense to say maybe we get our professional class from more disenfranchised places like Africa and South America, and we pay a stipend for people to be professional there. And then in the developed world like Japan and the United States and Europe, perhaps that comes from more project oriented and it's uncompensated. Maybe that's the balance we look for, but this is a living experiment. So your guess is as good as mine for it. And I can see it both ways. It's just my warning to people is you get what you pay for. And if you don't compensate, you'll see a situation where it tends to favor one demographic, one geography, one type of project. And if you're okay with that and you think that's our governance class, that's what you're going to get. But don't be surprised when that's what you get.
Yeah, yeah. In my opinion, I don't think we are ready yet for this round of budget. And, personally, I would love to propose it for maybe the next round, next year. Do you think the opportunity cost of not compensating DREPs this year will be risky for Cardano's growth?
Probably not, but it does disenfranchise groups of people. And so if you're comfortable with underrepresenting certain groups, it's probably not going to cause a major issue for us. It's not going to harm the growth of Cardano, but do understand that you're not going to get conflict-free people. Most of the people will be DREPs will probably be affiliated with institutions or projects or popular people of independent means. If that's your initial governance cohort, I can work with anybody. So, my job is to build stuff, and I don't care if it's DREP set A or B or C or D. I'll work with those DREPs, and we'll try our best to pull those pieces together. I did build Cardano with the intention of it being the people's money and being global. So it's really important for me that people from underrepresented groups and countries have a seat at the table. And I think the only way you're going to do that is by paying a stipend because they can't afford to take time off to go and be a full-time DREP. So it's really a fundamental conversation. That said, if your wages in that jurisdiction are $1,000 a month, it doesn't really cost a lot to get 50 or 100 D reps at that price point and subsidize them and have them work full time. So that's the other advantage we have is that the labor value is such that you can get some really phenomenal people at a decent price, and they'll add a lot of nuance and perspective to Cardano that we normally don't have.
Great. So, how about CC members? Do you think they should receive compensation?
Well, it's interesting because you know when we originally built it, we didn't anticipate, but we built a hook just in case that the CC members would be filled up with consortia. So instead of a single person, it's actually a group of people. And then the issue is like, what if there's 25 signatories for that? Do you still pay the same rate? Now you've diluted it 25 times, or now do you pay each one individually the same amount? So these multi-sig CCs are something we discovered from the elections, and it's not clear how that compensation will come through. But I have no problem if there's a stipend paid. I think the more valuable thing is actually for the CC people to have a stipend, a budget for staff. So, and let them basically allocate as they see fit, because that's typically what happens with senators and congressmen. If you get elected as a senator or congressman in the United States, I think it's the same in Japan with the Diet, you have a budget for hiring staff members as advisors to help you in that role do your job. Because being a legislator is a very complicated thing, and there's a lot of stuff that comes through, and you're not a subject matter expert in everything. So you need staff to help you manage the office. So I wouldn't be opposed with CC members being given a stipend to basically hire full-time people to help them facilitate their role, especially at the CC level. It's a little bit more challenging with a D rep because you can game the system. Anybody can be a D rep. So if you provide a stipend per D rep, I'll just register one to get a staff, and I'm using them for D rep stuff, and so, but CC is an elected role and it's a finite fixed role. So it does make more sense for that. And then what's nice is that you can pay yourself based out of that budget. And so, if it's 300,000 a year, you can decide to just give it all yourself, or do you actually use to hire several staff members or these types of things? That's probably the way to get around that and resolve that. For this round, I agree with you. We may not need to do that, but as the role becomes more complicated and intricate, and the volume of governance actions increase, and also the demands increase, including travel, it does make sense to provide some sort of stipend for that, especially if you want people meeting each other on a regular basis.
So, what are your thoughts on how SPO incentives should evolve over the next 5 years or so?
So you have a pool of capital, and because we have a fixed monetary policy that's allocated for block rewards, and it assumes a Proust-style distribution of blocks, so a Proust-style cadence. By design, you're going to have to change that model so that you don't add more ADA, but you just how the pool gets chopped up. If your set of block producers increases tremendously and the types of blocks that they create change, because now you have key blocks and input blocks and all these things going on, and so you're on a slightly different reward schedule. So Laos does require incentives changes, and we have to kind of figure out what that looks like. This is another reason why partner chains is so critical for me, because I want to create more revenue streams for a stake pool operator at the same time. Because I want to look at it like you're a service provider providing a collection of decentralized service offerings to the ecosystem as a whole, and you're compensated with multiple tokens to do that. And you kind of create a professional infrastructure class. So maybe they run an Iagon node and a Hydra head and a Mithril server, and they run a partner chain, and they're also an SPO. And then the combination of all those is basically money for that set of services that they're providing. But I don't have the right to change the reward function. It's critical that an on-chain governance system analyzes that. So the way we're designing Laos right now is we're basically prototyping it, and eventually we get to a point where a SIP is proposed, and then we implement. Well, at the point of the SIP is also a series of recommendations to change the reward function, and that has to be decided with an on-chain governance function of whether they want to do that or not. So we can use an info action to approve that and then make that part of the roadmap. And at that point, it can be implemented and integrated in via a hard fork into Cardano. So it's not changing the absolute supply of ADA. It'd just be changing the reward function of who gets paid and how those changes come through. That's why Basho could not be implemented before Voltaire. You had to do Voltaire first because you need the consent of the governed to change a reward function. Otherwise, one central entity is unilaterally deciding, okay, I'm now going to take the money from the SPOs and give it over here, or something like that. Nobody has the right to do that. That's a social contract, and only through acts of on-chain governance can we change the social contract. So we should have all that prototyping done in the second half of this year. And then it's just a decision of what we want to do as an ecosystem for that reward function. Parallel to that, partner chains is being built up, and Midnight will launch this year. And then it'll provide block rewards to the Cardano stake pool operators there. So they'll get 2 revenue streams instead of just 1 revenue stream. They'll get the Night tokens and the ADA for making blocks and maintain 2 ledgers as opposed to 1. Incumbent in this is an easier way of managing and orchestrating all the infrastructure, which is why we've been experimenting with Firefly, Hyperledger Firefly as a supernode architecture. And we've just gotten done plugging Cardano into it. The next step is to plug partner chains into it and Midnight into it to make it turnkey for stake pool operators to turn this infrastructure on and off. And the same can be done with Hydra orchestration or Iagon orchestration or these things. You just plug into that framework for it because we want to make it as easy as possible for stake pool operators to deploy and orchestrate. Otherwise, it's not profitable because it takes too long to deploy.
Fantastic. Thank you. So this IOG's roadmap is ambitious and really exciting. But what is beyond this roadmap? So what do you envision as the next phase of development after this roadmap?
So there's what we do for Cardano, and there's what my company Input Output Group does. And the bifurcation is the Input Output Engineering and Research is building Cardano, whereas Input Output Group is building on Cardano and with Cardano. So an Input Output Group, we're thinking of things like Lace and RealFi and Midnight. So these are all projects that are building on top or with Cardano to create partnership value. So we launch new tokens and we launch new experiences and these types of things. The process of doing that, it adds more to the Cardano ecosystem and it creates more demand for Cardano, more liquidity for Cardano, but it relies on Cardano infrastructure. And it assumes that Cardano infrastructure has a certain level of maturity. Building Cardano is what creates that maturity infrastructure for Cardano. So that's where Hydra lives, and that's where Leos lives, and that's where Plutus lives, and Aiken lives, and these types of things. So the company's really split into 2 parts from that dimension. And we actually, from a business perspective, did that. We actually created a company called Input Output Engineering, and we have an IOR, Input Output Research, and those divisions live separate. And then we have a venture studio model that builds those startups that basically go and build on top of Cardano. So every year, I'd like to get to a cadence of launching a partner chain. And we could look at things like social media and AI and other such things. And we launch them and we bring them into the Cardano ecosystem and we bring them across the cryptocurrency space as a whole. Every time we do it, it brings more users into Cardano because we're broadening the tent. And Lace will continue to evolve, and it's like our Windows or our Android. We view Lace as a platform, and there's a lot of things we can put into it, and it's going to go from just a browser wallet to having a dApp store and having game stores in it and all kinds of cool features that become the center point of your digital life and in the cryptocurrency space. And it's also going multi-asset. In fact, very shortly, we will have Bitcoin support for Lace, and so it'll support both Bitcoin and ADA. And we think Lace is going to be the best Bitcoin DeFi wallet, bringing a lot of transactions from Bitcoin into the Cardano ecosystem. So we're real excited to see what happens there. But it'll go beyond Bitcoin. It'll actually go to other assets as well. And it's going to go mobile. So it'll be on your phone. So it's kind of becoming that center point. So these are some of the things that we'll be focused on at Input Output Group. And what's fun is we get to kind of look around which one do we think is going to be the biggest bet. So I think probably the next one, depending upon where the markets go, will be a GameFi play, and that would likely be Quantum Hosky for 2026. But we'll basically see, and that's kind of a roll up of the meme coins, GameFi, and metaverse space. And there's a lot of really cool partnerships we're bringing into play there. But it just as well could be a social network, or it could be AI. It just depends on what we decide this year for that, based on our success with Midnight, the partner chain framework, and where the markets are at.
Incredible. So we briefly touched upon some of the dApps on Cardano, but so if you had a clone of yourself dedicated to building only dApps, not the infrastructure, what dApps would that clone create in the next 5 years?
Well, there's levels. There's free infrastructure that's required to enable. It's like Aiken or Hydra. And we really need to have custodians for some of these things and get them where they need to go. Like we don't have a Lightning Labs in the Cardano ecosystem, whereas Lightning Labs lives in Bitcoin and they do Lightning for Bitcoin. So it would be nice to have some of these middlewares develop custodial partners and differentiate and get those where they need to go. Then second, there's the dApps themselves. And really what we're talking about there is getting our DeFi and GameFi infrastructure competitive. So we have a lot of that stuff in Cardano, and they're doing a good job, and they're building quickly. They just need to get listed. They need more liquidity. They need more, TVL. We really need to get that where it needs to go. I think the stablecoin side, it needs a lot of great leadership, and we need to build a coalition of the smaller cap coins that have been screwed by Circle and Tether, and get them to work together as an alliance and share liquidity and get all these things together so that it's fair for everybody, because a cartel has formed that is very anti-competitive for all of us. So that area I would focus a lot of attention. And in terms of partner chains, what we need is about 3 to 5 per year to launch, because 1 or 2 will be duds and 1 or 2 will be successful. And what's nice about that is that we'll create a halo of value for Cardano, because it brings a lot of new things in. The distribution model, the Glacier Drop, means that you're distributing to more than just one ecosystem. So every time you launch something, you're merging users together. Midnight will launch to 135 million people. Even if 5% take that up, it's twice the population of Cardano. So that's a very powerful thing. And if you do that several times a year, you'll wake up and will be tens of millions of people in our ecosystem and using our infrastructure. So a huge inflow of liquidity, a huge inflow of transaction volume, a huge inflow of new users, and bringing them up. There needs to be some focus on education and taking people along the journey. Cardano has a lot of amazing USPs that are undervalued in the industry, like how we measure decentralization and how we do our development and how we do governance. So there needs to be some people that just exclusively focus on that, and they take care of these types of things. This is why sometimes I have umbrage with the foundation, because I think they focus on the wrong things. They put a lot of time, effort, and money worrying about how do we create client diversity by working with Pragma and creating competing clients and these types of things, when there really wasn't a strong demand for that. Whereas they didn't spend a lot of time on things like education, for example, and onboarding, and they didn't spend a lot of time when things like stable coins or oracles or these types of things, or when they did, it was, let's just go hire a big one like Circle and get them in, and it didn't work out. Well, they could have just as easily taken the same amount of money and effort and put it into USDM and USDA and built these up. They also have $600 million worth of ADA. It would have been very easy to take some of that treasury and put it into $50 million or $100 million minted of USDM and traded up the infrastructure and built up the liquidity. The same for getting people listed. Like, it's pretty dreary that the only Cardano native asset that's currently on a tier 1 exchange is SNEC. It's no criticism to the SNEC community. In fact, the opposite. Kudos to them. They've done amazing work and they've really pushed hard. But that probably should have been one of our DeFi applications if people were taking care of them and getting these things to go where they needed to go. So I'm a bit sad that that wasn't the case. That said, SNEC opened the door for everybody, and I'm glad that they did. And I'm very happy that that team was as aggressive as they were. So we need to take advantage of that, and we need to get some of these people some love and kindness. The same with setting up an incubation acceleration program. Instead of criticizing Catalyst and getting involved and changing the outcome, perhaps it would have been wise to put some of that money and give $25 million or $50 million to Techstars and get them to go and set up an incubation acceleration program. And so all these people that want to get listed say, well, look, if you agree to go through that program for 6 months to 12 months, we'll agree to help you on the other side get listed on the exchanges. And then you can get 20 or 30 of these projects into the mainstream and get them where they need to go. But I'm not in charge of that. They run that. And that's the balance and separation of power. And for better or for worse, it's where we're at as an ecosystem. And if they don't do it, at least we can have that conversation. Perhaps it should still be done, and do that through the budget process instead. That was the fallback that I intended, that no matter what, even if one entity doesn't do their job, there's always a second chance through some other construct that is a fallback plan. It's called a PACE plan, a primary, an alternate, a contingent, and an emergency plan. It's used a lot in the military.
Thank you. So 10 years from now, in a world where multiple blockchains coexist, what role will Cardano play? and what roles will other blockchains like Ethereum and Solana serve?
I believe that either you're a blockchain and you're committed to that, and what that means and what Satoshi lined out, or not. I'm a very absolutist in this. I don't have a middle ground. If you're truly committed to what Satoshi lined out, you have to be committed to decentralization. And you have to be committed that every day you get more decentralized and more resilient with the model. That's what Satoshi wanted. If you're not committed, you will inevitably become centralized and you'll be a blockchain in name only. It doesn't matter if it takes 5 years or 10 years. It just organically will happen. And we see this with Solana and Sui and these other guys. The consensus models that they've embraced have been built from the ground up to be better, faster, cheaper. But it costs $1 million to run a node. And fewer people can run them. And you get more and more centralized. And eventually somebody's going to say, well, why are we doing this with nodes? Let's just centralize the whole thing on Amazon. It's cheaper, right? There's no moral argument anymore to be decentralized once you've abandoned that principle. And if the only thing you care about is adoption and cost, the most efficient model there will always be centralization. And it's a race between the oligarchs, Oracle and IBM and Google and Microsoft and Amazon, and they'll just basically be your guys to run all these things. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. So I think Cardano has principles. We have a constitution. We have an Edinburgh Decentralization Index. We care deeply about these things, and I think the governance layer of Cardano is committed to continue that. So what we have to do is find a way to be competitive yet decentralized. It's the hardest space to be in. Laos is a great example of that. People act like we just don't know what we're doing, and look how much faster Sui and Solana are. We could have very easily in 2018 or 2019 built a protocol like that, and it'd probably been even faster than the protocols these guys have. We could have just taken Red Belly or Narwhal and Tusk or any of these things, and suddenly 500,000 transactions per second. But we wouldn't have been decentralized. So the reason we built Laos was we wanted to have the same performance profile but be decentralized. That took 6 years of research and development and hard effort. But there's a huge value to that 6 years of it invested, because we'll be the only ones who have that performance but be decentralized at the end of the day. So if the market values that, Cardano will survive. If the market doesn't value that, then it won't. And we as an ecosystem have to make that case. And governance is the same way. The governance system we have right now is a starting point, but we need to invest and be committed to including more and more people and having more ways of making decisions so that it's more resilient. So different voting systems like quadratic voting and linear preferences and these types of things. And also trying to find a way to be one person, one vote, in addition to one ADA, one vote. These types of dynamics that people have been asking for, but are sustainable in the sense of a cryptocurrency ecosystem. The same for our consensus. We should go multi-resource and have more than just proof of stake. We should have other resources that we optimize inside the system. And that's why we wrote Minotaur. And we get to beta test that with partner chains. And then if it works really well, we can bring it back home to Cardano's main ledger and augment what we have there. So I think if we continue to let that innovation and that culture grow, in 5 to 10 years, it'll continue to get more powerful. And then what'll end up happening is we become the only option for big things. Because, here's the thing. If you're European Union or United States, you want to put your election systems on a blockchain, you can't risk putting your election system on a blockchain controlled by 5 guys. You just can't. Because any one of them collude and they can decide who's the president of the United States. It's too risky. So your only option is to put it on a system that's fully decentralized, because nobody can co-opt the system to destroy the system. So I think Cardano will be quite competitive in the long term for those who really value true decentralization. And I think it's the only option for a world financial system. Because at the end of the day, I just don't think people want to sign up for another century to have America in control or China in control. If they're going to have an alternative system, they want a system that's truly intrinsically fair. And I don't see any of that with the current blockchain systems. Either they're not programmable and they're too slow for purpose, or they are too centralized to trust with a world financial system.
Thank you. So another community question. What potential role might you have in the Trump administration?
So Trump is a unique guy. Never in my life have I seen a politician as remarkably effective as Trump at getting a message out and creating momentum and creating a political movement. And he's just one of those guys that has been able to change the entire political landscape around himself. Um, this is the equivalent of, actually, there's never been an equivalent in American politics to Trump. Even Grover Cleveland, when he came back, it was contentious on both sides. But Trump not only came back, he took over the entire Republican Party and took over the entire country. He's in charge of every branch of government: the judicial branch, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and he has a mandate. And he has put in one of the most powerful cabinets of all time. These cabinet members aren't normal cabinet members. A lot of them are billionaires in their own right, and they have an enormous amount of influence in their own right. And he's pooled all those together. He's also taken over the American oligarchy. He has Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, and he has Elon Musk and all these other people that he didn't have in his prior administration. And these people have empires in their own right, and they've consolidated all their resources with Trump. So he's leading from a position of profound strength. The other thing is he's now going to war with the US government. So he's going agency by agency, and he's firing all the people he doesn't like, and he's putting people who like him. So he's consolidating power in a way that very few presidents ever get to consolidate power. And this is because he actually knows how to do it this time around. He's had 8 years of learning and thinking, and he has surrounded himself with people that are very loyal. So he actually knows how to purge the government. The courts will slow him down for a year or two, but I think he'll consolidate power. And if J.D. Vance gets elected after him, it'll be a dynasty like Reagan was. This is the last time we saw this in American politics. And before that, FDR, which was 1932, to give you a sense of how rare this is in American politics. So the president has made a decision that he wants the United States of America to be the best country to found, fund, and run a cryptocurrency business. And with this newfound mandate, he's assembling an all of government approach. And to tell you how fast the president's moving, I had dinner with Senator Tim Scott in DC last year. And Tim and I were talking about, well, what's the legislative branch going to do? And he said, oh, the president's moving fast. Well, February, there was a press conference with David Sachs, his crypto czar, and they announced that they formed a bicameral working group with all committees that are necessary in the Congress and the Senate for cryptocurrencies, which means that they can pass legislation for cryptocurrencies within 100 days. It's just unheard of to do that. Usually the legislative branch is very fragmented and very political, and he just brought the whole guys together just because Trump wants it. He says, go do that. So they're moving very quickly. They're very powerful. We're closer to the legislative side than we are the executive branch. That said, I know many people in the executive branch. Some are friends of mine, like Robert Kennedy, for example, who I campaigned for last cycle. And we will be working with that branch on an as-needed and advisory basis. It's just a question of what do they need. We're going to be working a little bit more closely with the legislative branch because there's one law in particular that we have to get right, which is the new FIT 21. FIT 21 was passed by the House last year, and it's a prototype regulatory framework for asset classification. Is it a security or is it a commodity? And that's where the source of almost all the lawsuits came from the SEC in the last cycle. We need to get that legislation right. In it, there needs to be a proper definition of decentralization. We think the Edinburgh Decentralization Index is the appropriate definition. So we're going to work really, really, really hard to help get that process along, including me speaking before the Senate and working with the lawmakers to get that done. On the executive side, what I'm going to encourage the president to do is it's very important that he broaden the crypto working group because right now it's too narrow. And in particular, I think it's very important that he brings in NIST, DARPA, the NSF, and other agencies because the academic and standards community have not been included in this process. And a huge part of the cryptocurrency industry is getting the research, the standards, and the scientific funding where it needs to be so we can continue running that Leviathan because a lot of it's going to China, as we've seen with DeepSeek. So it's really important that we broaden that base a little bit and we get that more included, and we'll get that to the president. And, we'll give our advice and we'll see if they take it or not. But it's a very fluid thing. We didn't know, for example, in December that they were going to merge AI and crypto together and create one czar for both. So that's the Trump administration for you, and he's a very powerful president, much more powerful than a normal president, and he has a very strong mandate. And he's signing hundreds of executive orders every week. So, literally every day something comes out and we see that thing. The other interesting thing is what Elon Musk is going to do with cryptocurrency. He's always been at the surface playing with expectations. He's adopted Doge as his pet, and he kind of runs that part of the space. We all know he's planning on getting into the cryptocurrency space full tier, and that's going to be through X. X will be a cryptocurrency wallet, and it'll be the largest cryptocurrency wallet in the world. It'll be 500 million users. Great. So then the question is, well, what cryptocurrencies does he support? Does he want to do DeFi? What chains does he want to actually start investing in and doing? It's been mercurial. Nobody knows. Not Ethereum, not Solana, nobody. And also, he's going to make recommendations for the US government to adopt cryptocurrency as well. And there's been a lot of discussion. Would Cardano be in that conversation? I would believe so. The challenge is that Elon can't mandate that the US government do that. It has to go through the normal procurement process. And what will happen is that those RFPs will take years to work their way through because there will be lawsuits and debates and congressional acts that are required, all kinds of things. And so, whenever that process comes, we'll be there. So we're involved in all of the above. We know everybody on these sides, and we talk with them on a regular basis. We're not as flashy as Brad Garlinghouse going around and, oh, I'm doing this and doing that, but by no means are we left out. We actually have a seat at the table as an ecosystem for these things, and they're good people. Bo Hines, for example, great guy. And if you ever meet him, you ever spend some time with him, the people on my side who've engaged with him, he's been nothing but gracious, very smart, very talented, and he's part of the crypto working group that the president has appointed. And many people say David Sachs is a great guy as well. I haven't personally met him yet, but I know people have spent time with them and done that. And at some point, our paths will cross. Whereas I do know Scott personally, and he's a brilliant mind. I do know Senator Lummis, who's in charge of the cryptocurrency commission, the committee in the Senate. She's my senator. We worked with her as early as 2022 on FIA. So we know all these people on a first name basis. In some cases, we text them, and so we're there. And you just don't make it flashy because the game here is not to gain points on Twitter. The game here is to get legislation passed and to create an environment where we no longer get sued as an industry and we have stable markets as an industry. The last 4 years were horrible, where Coinbase got sued, Kraken got sued, Binance got sued, and you had the FDIC telling banks to deplatform cryptocurrency companies. I had bank accounts shut down. And you just couldn't operate in this type of environment where you're wondering, gosh, how long is it before I get the lawsuit or this person gets a lawsuit? And I have to spend, like Ripple did, 3 or 4 years and $300 million to win, and then for the SEC to continue going even after they've won. It's not a tenable situation. So the number one goal is get rid of that environment, to wash all that away. The number two goal is to create a pro-growth environment, meaning all the conditions are there for things to happen. And the number three goal is let's get the United States government on a blockchain. And let's make sure Cardano is part of that story. And I think there's a path there.
Super exciting. And I think a lot of crypto projects, blockchain projects, DAOs are looking at the US jurisdiction as a home of their project, and especially Wyoming, and where you have a lot of connections. And I think A16Z endorsed DUNA, Decentralized Unincorporated Nonprofit Association in Wyoming, as like one of the go-to legal entity for DAOs. But you also mentioned that maybe within 100 days, there might be federal level legislation for crypto projects in the US. Like for DAOs that are considering looking for a DAO wrapper, would you recommend DUNA in Wyoming, or should they wait for another 3 months or so for the federal legislation?
Well, the nice part about the United States is that it's a tight union, and we have something called the Interstate Commerce Clause. And so because of that, I don't think it's an issue that if you incorporate in Wyoming and there's a better regulation somewhere else, to just lift up and go. That's very easy to do, and nobody can put a barrier for that. And many people have moved their businesses, especially from California to Texas, as an example, and you can't stop that from happening. So I don't think there's any reason to wait or stop. It's more like, where is the eye of Sauron? Where's the eye of the U.S. government? And right now, the one they're worried the most about is stablecoins. So that's what they're going to focus on. And that makes sense because there's $1 trillion of transactions going, I think, every month, and hundreds of billions of dollars in it. And there's some existential questions about how to regulate those. And so that's low hanging fruit. They understand how to regulate it. They just got to get that done. Then after stablecoins, the very next thing will be asset classification. DAOs are higher up on the stack, and I don't even know if they'll get to that at the federal level for how to legislate DAOs, because there's a lot of very political, deeply uncomfortable conversations. If you regulate it in a certain way, you may be able to get rid of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and all these other guys, which I'd love that. That's great. But unfortunately, I don't think that's high on the stack of things to do. So the state levels where those things shine, and I've consistently found that the laws in Wyoming are appropriate, and that the Secretary of State's office of Wyoming is quite easy to work with, and they understand crypto at a very high level. I have some grievances with the Wyoming stablecoin project, but that's more of an anomaly. There are 40 laws that have been passed that are all crypto related, and I think those laws are great. So if I was starting a new crypto business and I wanted to be in the United States, that's a great place to be. But Japan also has a DAO law, as does Abu Dhabi, and so really you have to start with, is it for profit or not for profit? What are your tax goals? Where is your labor going to be? Where's your community at? And what type of relationship do you want to have with the regulator? And are you dealing with regulated business or unregulated business? Oh, and really, you have to work through that, and then that'll help you understand where the best jurisdiction is to be. If you're doing tokenized intellectual property with anime, I'd probably say maybe Japan is the place to be for that, man. Yeah, go get that done. Especially if you're in a not-for-profit structure and you want to bundle a foundation with that, then you don't actually have to worry about the onerous tax regime that can be there. So, but if you're doing commoditized oil futures and you want to tokenize oil securities, probably the United States and Wyoming is the best place in the world for you, because it's both an oil state and a crypto state. It's okay, this is your home. They're going to get that. They're going to understand that. So it really depends on the nature of the business, I'd say.
Thank you. Thank you. Your visit to Japan last year had a tremendous impact on our community. So community members from remote areas travel to Tokyo to attend events, and many of them for the first time. And we successfully onboarded new members and companies to Cardano, and Japanese media attention has increased significantly. So we are coordinating with the IOG event team to plan a week of Cardano events in the second week of October following Token 2049 in Singapore. Can we expect to see you in Japan in October?
Well, not only October, I'd love to actually see you guys a little sooner, see if we can do something in March. I'm going to Hawaii in March, and I was born there, pretty close to Japan. So it'd be nice to actually start in Japan, come on over to Hawaii. But I'd love to do that, actually. I think it's important because there's a big debate right now about the budget and the Constitution and other things. And I'd like to make myself personally available to talk to the D-reps in the Japanese community and large data holders in the Japanese community and answer all questions they have and help get them more included. I think Japan needs to have more representation in the global debate. The majority of ADA, I think, or at least a large minority of ADA, still is in Japan. And ADA, let's be clear here, Cardano would not exist without Japan. Japan has always been the strongest Cardano basis and the one that had the faith to build the project. So they need a very significant seat at the table. They deserve that. And many of the leaders in our governance need to be Japanese faces and represent the Japanese community. So it's very important on a regular basis that we go to Japan, we engage with those in Japan, and we continue investing. The other thing is I want to see more Japanese dApps enter in. It's not okay that the majority of our dApps are from Europe and the United States. We should have the majority of our dApps in some capacity be connected to Japan in some way, given the provenance of the project as a whole. So if not just talking about governance, but also encouraging Japanese entrepreneurs to step up and create some wealth and build some things, I think there's a great wave of things that can come. And there's many different ways, and there's great community leaders like Sebastian, for example, from DC Spark. He's done great work with Paima, and a lot of the games he's released have been great. Also, we want more Japanese partners with Midnight. We think that Midnight is a project that uniquely fits into the Japanese ethos. of responsible privacy. It's something that's not like edgy and weird like Zcash and Monero, but it's not open and transparent like most blockchains. It's responsible. It's somewhere in the middle. And this fits very uniquely into a Japanese ethos on how to do these things. So I think a lot of Japanese companies would deeply appreciate this technology and see value in this type of technology. And I think there's a lot of potential business that we can bring that way. In fact, it would be really cool to see if we can get some people that have built on Ethereum to start to move over to Cardano. I'd love to see, for example, Sony could come over and others can come over. You can't really make that case unless you're there and you have those conversations. And so I'd love to work with you and Yuta and others and have that conversation and just engage people and get more Japanese faces. So I'd love come March, and it would be cool to come in October as well. Doesn't take a lot to get me to come to Japan. I love Japan. It's one of my favorite countries. And from even before the crypto days, I grew up in Hawaii, and I was watching Akebono Taro, when I was a kid in Hawaii. It was Hawaii is the only state where sumo was broadcast. So there's strong connections there.
Incredible. Yeah, I'll do my best to fulfill my obligation. It's an honor to be a CC member, and also Socius, my company, is building on Cardano and Midnight. So on that aspect, there are some dApps on Cardano from Japan. So we'll make sure to promote that. I know because of language barriers, they are not so well known globally. So we'll do our best to do our marketing and make sure we are included in the global conversations. Yeah. And I believe in balancing work with enjoyment. And last year, I personally had so much fun with the otters. And what activities interest you for this year's visit in Japan?
Well, if I'm going in March, it'll likely only be Tokyo bound. That said, my brother, many people don't know this. In addition to being a doctor, he also owns a business called Hoskbrew, which specializes in repairing Nintendos and Super Nintendos and bringing and resurrecting a lot of the old intellectual property. Like, for example, we buy old Nintendo games and rebuild them. For Lace Wallet, we're actually adding a Nintendo emulator to it, and we're actually going to take some of our original IP and ship it with Lace. So the very first game that's going to come out is called Crystal Mine. So great interest in exploring that legacy of games that come from Japan and going and seeing, Nintendo's place and seeing some of the other assets like Godzilla, for example. There's a museum in Tokyo. I'd love to go and visit it, and these types of things. I'm actually building a diorama for my clinic with Godzilla fighting Ghidorah. Yeah, let me show you. Actually, I have a picture of the diorama. It's 9 feet by 12 feet, so I think that's like 2.5 meters by 3.5 meters. So it's quite large. And here's some of the cool pictures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's the
That's awesome.
digital rendering that we have. But what we did is we built a life size, a scale sized rendering of Tokyo. So we have Tokyo Tower and the skyscrapers and the Shinkansen track, and we have the 6-foot Godzilla fighting the 7-foot King Ghidorah. And so this is an area of my passion of mine, and I'm very nerdy about these things, and so I love building these types of things. So to actually go and visit where they came from and see the studio and talk to the people is quite fun. Love the food as well. That's always remarkable, and I try to spend as much time. I regret that I don't have enough time to go see the countryside. A lot of people spend so much time in the cities, they forget that Japan's real beauty is going to Fuji and going to the parks and going to the wilderness and wild and enjoying that. And there's so many untouched natural beauties that are on the island that I wish I could spend. Like last time I was in Japan, I went to Mount Koya and to go around that whole area and see Kukai and these other things. That was just amazing. And I didn't have a chance to do that when I lived in Osaka. So it's great to have seen it.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure that it happens. I will reserve the Godzilla Museum. And also, last year, Chris, Jack, Roman, and Ben actually went to the countryside, like the deep countryside in Tokushima. And there are a bunch of dApps and Cardano projects in that area. There's a football team with a Cardano logo on their jersey. And we played football against these professional guys. And that was so much fun. And it will be nice for you to visit that area if we have time as well.
Well, Roman is, I think, going to live our CTO in Japan for 6 months a year. So he's going to build those routes. He's like the canonical French guy who falls in love with Japan and moves to Japan. It's very, we saw a lot of that in Osaka, and there's a connection there. So I think we now have an outpost, and Dan Friedman is still, of course, in Japan. He'll never leave. So we have a lot of great people that are there. And what I'd like to do is just take off 2 months or 3 months and go to a remote area and just go and live there for a little bit and take up the shakuhachi and these things and relax. I think that might be where I do my vacation, when I finally get to take real time off. Where I think we might end up starting a Japanese business, though, is that we're very interested in quantum computing. And some of your listeners may not know this, but Japan is actually a world leader in quantum computing research, especially Tokyo Institute of Technology. And I think there could be a role to play in building an R&D hub and exploring the quantum world in Japan. And then there can be a lot of really cool things to do there. And because the world is so remote, I think it'd be a lot of fun to do that in one of the underserved prefectures and actually go there and build up an innovation center and bring a lot of quantum scientists in. The local governments all want this. They've all been asking for tech jobs and people to not go to the big cities but come back to the countryside. And so it'd be really fun to see if we could do something like that and build a large intellectual property basis. And that would be a cool project. Unfortunately, we're not quite where we need to be to do that. We're so busy with all these other projects. But there's another project that I'm quite interested in too, that I think Japan could be a leader in, which is in synthetic biology. I'm very interested in taking spiders and genetically engineering, taking their genes and then genetically engineering silkworms to make spider silk. Yeah, so the reason being is that spider silk is much stronger than steel and it's considerably lighter. And Japan would be actually one of the key countries to do something like that in, either China or Japan. And obviously, America and China don't get along very well. So Japan is the way to go. They have better food anyway. So it'd be a lot of fun to do something like that in Japan. And again, that would be a perfect job for the countryside, especially in places that used to be part of the textile industry and it's kind of died away. You could buy up all that infrastructure, reconstruct the whole thing, and it's a nice market to be in. So these are the kinds of things that would be fun to bring jobs to Japan and to leverage the natural infrastructure that they have. And then you have a reason to go there beyond just tourism. I'm a big believer that you have to find partnerships, and partnerships strengthen people and that make a strong relationship. And then decades they stay the same. And Japan and America have one of the strongest partnerships of any two countries, which is really an extraordinary story. Normally, when countries go to war with each other and it's a brutal war, there's a lot of hard feelings and bad blood. But we did the opposite. We just basically became an economic union. And for 7 decades, these two countries have been so strong together. So it feels like a second home, and everybody's so incredibly gracious and welcoming. And it would be really cool to build an actual business there and to grow that actual business. And what's really nice is then Cardano can be part of that. Like if you're doing GMO with silk caterpillars that do spider silk, we can track that on the Cardano blockchain. And all those products can use QR codes to show the supply chain using Cardano. The intellectual property of the gene lines can be protected using Midnight. There's licensing regimes that you can put in for that and for this. So there's all kinds of Cardano intersections. Quantum computing is just the same. If we build working quantum computers, it would actually be really cool to use those for Cardano, and then we can have quantum money. You don't even need a blockchain for payments anymore. You can do offline, off-chain payments with quantum money. So a lot of great innovation can come, and I think Japan's one of the few countries in the world that has the ability to actually do that and keep up with the United States and the rest of the world. In fact, in some cases, it's the best country in the world for these types of things.
Incredible. So I guess like you mentioned, like different synthetic biology and quantum computing, etc. So I think Cardano stands as one of your major legacies today. At the same time, you've established a clinic and developed glow-in-the-dark plants, raised bison, and contributed to mathematics. Beyond Cardano, what other legacies would you like to leave behind?
Well, I think there's a lot that I can do in my lifetime. So on the medicine side, our family legacy has been in medicine since the 1950s. My grandfather was a physician. My dad's a physician. My brother's a physician. My uncle's a physician. I was the weird one who liked mathematics more than medicine. but I still enjoy medicine and I understand an enormous amount about it, which is why I built a clinic. We now have 12,800 patients. We have 40 doctors that work for us, 4040. And it's multi-specialty. So we have cardiology, neurology, nephrology, internal medicine, et cetera. So what's nice with that tremendous public trust is that we've been able to considerably improve the healthcare of Gillette, Wyoming, and we use it as a clinical research site. So I built the clinic with the purpose of doing biotechnology. And the type of biotechnology I'm most interested in is anti-aging regenerative medicine. So all these diseases exist and people study them, like how do I treat diabetes or how do I treat heart disease or all these other things. Well, a lot of those diseases are a consequence of us just getting older and our body falling apart. If you can regenerate the body, then you don't get the chronic ailments. And so that seems like first principles, the number one thing to focus on. So in particular, where we're focused in anti-aging is stem cells. And what I wanted to do was create a universal platform where we can take stem cells, make them more effective, and then use them as a quarterly regimen to gradually regenerate and rejuvenate people. So what we do is we take your fat and then we upgrade it and we make adipose derived mesenchymal stem cells and we combine it with other things like peptides or hyperbarics or other complementary treatments. And our hope is to build an FDA approved therapy that we can use quarterly for people for rejuvenation that will prevent chronic ailments or help treat chronic ailments and make people basically younger. Now, that's a platform. And once you build up on that, you can keep adding to it. So I think over 30 to 50 years, my legacy could be that we made a substantial contribution to a field of science called gerotherapeutics. So that's the science of aging and preventing and enhancing aging. I have no grandparents left. All four of them are dead. And three of the four died of neurodegenerative disorders. Two died of Alzheimer's and dementia. One died of Parkinson's. All of them lost their memory by the time they died. So it's not lost on me that statistically speaking, as I get older, I could develop those conditions. So it's very important, that you invest early because if this technology grows, it'll mean that future generations don't have those problems. So I'm incredibly passionate about medicine. The other side of biotechnology that I'm really passionate about is accelerated healing. So, in above and beyond just slowing down aging, it would be really cool that if somebody gets injured, we can do something to help them get better faster. So, we can develop bandages that heal surgical wounds. We can develop things to regenerate your smell. We can regrow limbs. There's all kinds of crazy technologies that this platform will enable in 30 to 50 years with continued investment. And we'll just do it the Cardano way. So you start from first principles, you engage the academic organizations. We're already partnered with the Buck Institute, which is a premier anti-aging group. We're working with other universities in the biotechnology side. You start writing papers, you engage that scientific community, you bring everybody together, and you do FDA trials. And that's why I built the clinic the way I did, so I can do FDA trials, and we can prove that the medicine actually works and push that through. Then the other side of it is dealing with the consequences of infectious disease. And I think one of the biggest problems that the world is running into is antibiotics are not working as well as they used to. And there's a very strong possibility that we could start seeing a epidemic of antibiotic resistant diseases like tuberculosis make a resurgence. This was a disease so terrible that one of our presidents recently lost two of his brothers to tuberculosis. That was Richard Nixon when he was growing up. And Nixon wasn't too far ago. There's still people that remember interacting with him and spending time with him. It's not like he was 150 years ago in the Wild West. This is a modern president. And it gives you a sense of how distributed that disease is. And it's becoming a big public health epidemic, especially in Central Asia and the Philippines. So I would like to develop a collection of therapeutics using a technology called bacteriophages. And bacteriophages are viruses that actually eat bacteria. You can genetically engineer those viruses to actually target any bacteria you want. So you can use it for microbiome reprogramming. You can use it to treat tuberculosis. You can use it to treat gonorrhea. You can use it to treat MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, all kinds of diseases. So mastering genetic engineering of bacteriophages and putting them into therapeutics is another area that we're very keenly involved in. So I think that'll be a big part of my legacy and something that is deeply connected to my family history. We've been in medicine for 70 years, and it would be good to heal and prevent The other side that I'm very interested in is synthetic biology. And there, you're doing new things. Like I have this company that does glow in the dark plants. And we'll probably at some point publicly show what we have, which is truly remarkable. And that's the beginning of designer organisms to augment the environment. And so it's not just about glowing plants, it's about saying, can you engineer life to make the world better for people, to make it less toxic, to make food better, to improve the energy situation, to change deserts into jungles and make them more livable, to bring back sea life, to get the coral where it needs to go. There's absolutely so many things you can do to change the ambient environment to make it so much better for people. So that company, just by illuminating plants, that means every roadway can have glowing trees. That means golf courses can glow in the dark. You can do all these really cool things with it. And that's just the beginning of a whole house of new capabilities. So if you look 30 to 50 years, you say, what type of legacy? We could literally bioengineer the whole planet if we want to do that. And we can do all kinds of crazy stuff. That's where all the oxygen came from. It was the cyanobacteria revolution. It grew for 1 billion years and it produced all the oxygen we breathe today. One bacteria, one organism, given enough time, can geoengineer the entire planet. So similarly, if you can engineer designer organisms, you can change the planet for the better. And this allows us to tackle climate change. This allows us to tackle all kinds of challenges that exist and also not look at population necessarily as a detriment. People say, oh, India has too many people, China has too many people, and people bad, people bad. And it's like, well, those are human beings you're talking about. They're not numbers, they're not statistics. They have souls, they're humans, they have a conscience, they deserve to live. So if we want to have them, well, then we have to engineer the planet in a way that can sustain that. And so through bioengineering and synthetic biology, you can get your way out of it and create more net resources for us. So technology can solve that problem. So I would love to live in a world where those things exist, and thus we can have all these people and sustain them, and we don't have to worry about us all getting wiped out from global warming or something like that. So that's another big part of the legacy, I think. And finally, I think the work in mathematics, what we started at the Hoskinson Center for Formal Mathematics at CMU, means that over a 20 to 30 year period, all of modern mathematics will become machine understandable. What that means is that all of mathematics can be operated on, processed, and creativity can come from artificial intelligence. So that means some of the greatest math problems will be solved, and they will be solved within my lifetime. The Riemann hypothesis, the Goldbach conjecture, the Navier-Stokes Hodge conjecture, all kinds of problems will be solved within my lifetime, which will advance math by centuries as a result of making these things machine understandable. And I think that will be done in part at the Hoskinson Center. And so I was a failed mathematician. I never got a PhD in it. And people like to remind me on a regular basis of that. But you know what? I think the Hoskinson Center will get the last laugh, and will actually be able to be contributing to these types of things. Because at the end of the day, like the AIs are getting so good that they're a domain expert in all fields of math at the same time. Even if you're Terry Tao and you're the most brilliant mathematician ever to live, you're only good at maybe 3 or 4 of them, not 50. And to be at that level in all 50 fields at the same time means you can find those connections that are missing and that creativity that's missing, and you'll be able to solve those problems. Well, a superhuman understanding of mathematics, that's the queen of sciences. That's the foundation of the entire STEM field. The more we understand there, the easier it is for us to advance physics and chemistry and biology and all these other fields. So that becomes the skeleton key to get humanity to the next level and make us a multiplanetary species and resolve the energy crisis and figure out new ways of doing designer materials that are basically like nanomaterials and miracles and these types of things. So the fact that we get to be on the ground floor of that is very exciting. It's like almost like the early days in the 50s with the invention of computers, where they knew they had something very special and very exciting, and they didn't know where computers were going to go, but they knew it was going to change everything. And so it's very similar here with the Hoskinson Center. I think we're at the ground floor of the mechanization of mathematics in a way where AI can legitimately understand and make predictions and creatively do thousands of man years of research and solve all these very hard problems in advanced science. So if I could do those 3 things in addition to Cardano over my lifetime, and cure some of these diseases, and use geoengineer the planet to make it better and to solve the big math problems. I think that's a life well spent, and I'd be very proud to live that life.
That's a lot of legacies for one person. Solve climate change, having that scientific advance through mathematics and cure diseases. Yeah, I'm in. So yeah, if you need any help, I would love to support. And yeah, thank you so much for being generous with your time. And by the way, I see the glowing plants just behind you, and not sure if that's your invention, but the plants are glowing and really, really excited. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your generous time, and always really a lot of appreciation for your work.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. This was so much fun.
Thank you.